Nadia, for you, what do you want to see happen next?
What do I want?
What do you want to see happen next?
We've kept talking about accountable governance for a very, very, very long time. And I will use my example. When we were getting into this industry, I mean the music industry, when you have a name, you have status, you weren't able to publicly call out a vice, call out, let's say, a leader for something they haven't done. For the first time in history, you've seen artists, you've seen influencers in the front line. Because sometimes when we sign contracts, sometimes you're told you shouldn't associate yourself with anything that is happening in the country. But for the first time, even as one of the things that I base off my career, I never want to talk about politics. But for the first time, I remember, hiyo siku ya maandamano ya kwanza, nilikuwa huko, nimeangushwa, niko na hadi alama up to date. So for me, it's about accountable governance. And someone said from the X space, we need to make it so unbearable for anyone who's getting into any public office to hold the office space if you do not like accountability. So anyone that is getting into office has to be ready to be questioned, to be asked, because we are the bosses. So siti kila siku tumekopa sijui how many billions every single day, or we are being taxed, taxes. The other day I was checking bei ya tissue paper. The last time, like nikikuwa Mwehoko, me I'm from Mwehoko, it was 15 shillings. Sai tissue paper, hakuna tissue paper hata ya 20 shillings. The cost of living inaendelea ikipanda as a day goes by. So, kwa nini tunakuwa, like vitu zinakuwa expensive, but the salary ni the same? You understand? Like, kama wewe ulikuwa unauza, nitasema aje, kama tusema ulikuwa uko na biashara yako, the moment you start raising your prices because what you're purchasing with imepanda bei, like the supplier price imepanda bei. So wewe ukiongezea customers wako, inakuwa ni ngumu for them to come back. You understand? So for me, it's about accountable governance. Let us hold every single person accountable. Yes.
All right. Accountable. Steve.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Is one thing I can say, Alan, what is happening now is what our fathers began in so many years ago. And along the way, they lost the momentum. And I think that is how we found ourselves, because the war to bring in a new constitution is a struggle that has been there for a long time. And the day the constitution was being promulgated on 10th of August 2010, the whole Africa, the whole world praised Kenya for a very progressive constitution. Everybody knew that now Kenya is politically, economically, and socially liberated. The president of Kenya, Dr. Samuel Ruto, when he was campaigning on the mantra of socio-economic justice. Article 43 of the Constitution was his anchor. When he was speaking to the youth about job employment, when he was speaking to the Mamamboga about improving their livelihood, when he was speaking to the Boda Boda rider, who is a youth, about empowerment, he was addressing Article 43. Then what have we noticed? No one is bothered about adherence to the rule of law. What they are doing is to pull things toward themselves. What do I expect to see? Scrapping off of the NGCDF, we need to do away with that, and constitutional fund, which has turned our parliamentarians to become executive puppets. Doing away with bursaries and pumping the money to the education sector. Everybody to have an equal right, because they use these goodies to buy us off, to buy our parents off. So we want to ensure that they stop assuming that we have to go and knock their doors and queue at the CDF offices begging to get money to go to school, yet Article 43 talk about my rights to education. So these are the expectations we want to see. So as he sends away the cabinet, we want to see very serious reforms, and that's why this call for serious reform is not ending, and we are not stopping, because we are coming for the throats of these parliamentarians metaphorically, because look at what happens at the Senate. They dropped the bill for the conflict of interest. Why? Because they want to continue tendering for the government. Some years back, nobody wanted to supply to the government because nobody used to be paid. Right now, they are running that cartel. That is what we want to stop. That is the Kenya we want, where everyone has an equal chance. Everyone, when you are arrested, you have a right to representation. Police respect the rule of law. Everybody respect the rule of law, because that is the equalizer for everyone, because the rule of law is better than the rule of man.
Thank you, thank you. Reverend, go the same question. Can you help us figure out from where you sit, what should be these actual next steps? What would you like to see? What should we all sort of collectively try to figure out and say, this is what we think should happen?
Hi, can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Sorry, I wasn't introduced. My name is Go Wiodera. There are a couple of things we need to be able to recognize, James, what we are up against in this movement. One is that the president, as real colors have come out. Even in his campaign, we need to recognize that a leopard does not change its spots. In the early 90s, when we were doing our clamor, we were here in Ufungamano, he wasn't here. He was part of YK2. And they were the part of our generation that were co-opted by Moi with money. When we were doing the constitution and clamor for constitution, he voted no. In fact, he said that ni kama karatasi ya kufunga nyama. So constitutionalism is not part and parcel of those who are in office. So that is what we are up against. The second thing what we're up against is a culture, all right? A culture that does not necessarily value hard work and a meritocracy in itself. So Gen Z are trying to say, we are putting in all this effort to get what we want. Now we are seeing people wakivuka line and getting there without even earning what they are. And lastly, I think a thing that we have, and the panelists have said, is accountability. And I think those are the three things we need to continue championing moving forward. What Gen Z, I'd like to be able to encourage this group of young people, this generation of young people, is recognize that this is actually a marathon. This is not a sprint. And so there are certain gains we need to make. And I think there's somewhere we need to celebrate what we have gained these past 3 weeks. And we need to celebrate that. In as much as some of our comrades have fallen, we need to celebrate this. This is a great thing, that a government can withdraw a finance bill is a big accomplishment that I'd like to celebrate what these young people have done. It is something I am proud of you. We are proud of you. And you've done something my own generation was not courageous as you to do. And you have taken this to another level.
So just to your point, as I come back this way, there's two problems here that we have to contend with. There is the question of dialogue that keeps being bandied about. I want you to speak about this question of dialogue. And then at the tail end of this process, it's a political process. So there has to be a reasoning on how the public engages politically, because those changes have to happen in a political construct where the politicians have the experience more than anyone else. So
the issue of dialogue is who is dialoguing. So the referee cannot be the player. James, the referee can't be the player. And so you don't have the credibility. Now, the institution that I am part of, the church, has lost its credibility too. Yeah. When we were supposed to be doing what we were supposed to be doing, we were sitting in State House. So we've lost the credibility too. So there needs to be another umpire, another person doing this. We can learn from others. We're not the first ones to do this. So there are other actors that can come and do it. And secondly, James, it can't be a political process alone. Yes, we understand there are political processes that have to be happen, but there's also a place where we need to talk about the economics of this dialogue. We also need to talk about, and very big is just the philosophy of how we do it. So we cannot give it to the politicians. We left the politicians to do the final putting together of our constitution. And look what they gave us. So we can't trust the politicians. We can't. And I tell you guys, don't trust the politicians. We can't leave it alone to them. In as much as they are players, it has to be a collaborative effort.
Right. The question of how not leaving these to politicians then become an important question. There's hyper, right now, engagement. Every citizen is engaged with every document that comes from State House, that comes from, government. But that's, in all honesty, is one thing that keeps them accountable. But at some point, as they say, people be like, I have things to do, as Nadia says. I need to go sell my tomatoes. I can't be every day on a space for 8 hours, right? That is my job. So walk me through this question of what part of engagement should we be talking about and accountability, and how does that look like, so that we keep this process alive, to make sure that we all don't lose our time and also don't get fatigued with the process.
I think one thing we need to appreciate, there was Goldenberg some time back. Let me start there. A report was prepared. People had a lot of discussions. We saw a lot of parading of people. Then that dwindled. We saw Anglo-Rising came. People ate public money. They could not be held accountable. Then that disappeared. People like there was a Ndongo report on land justice. Nothing became out of it. The Commission on Justice and Reconciliation, there was a report about that. Nothing ever done about it. Until people are now tired. And what we are saying is, we want to see full implementation. And because we know some of these people cannot be able to do that for the obvious reasons that they don't believe in the Constitution itself, and it's very unfortunate even the church took a position of fighting the Constitution, a very dangerous route in 2010. We need to, those who cannot do their job, they step aside and they allow those who can do the job to take over and steer this country in full implementation of our Constitution. Because some of these things, they don't need to remind the president that every child needs education. When the government was being formed in 1963, there were three things: poverty, diseases, and ignorance. Our education system still affordable, and the people are able to go to school? No. Do our hospitals still providing medicines? You find 8 counties are lacking medicine for BCG, for tuberculosis vaccination to children. We are exposing them, and someone has money where he can walk into a fundraiser and give the same money to the church. I always wonder what this project in the church that never ends, and we attend the same churches. And so you go to the third issue, the issue of poverty, ignorance, and the one is, the education. We have ignorance, we have diseases, and we have poverty. How many Kenyans are living below $1 a day income? Most Kenyans are, that's why they are online. That's why you find them on login the whole day, because what else will I be doing? Moving around myself. Before I got an internship as an advocate, I remember I dropped 36 CVs in the city of Nairobi. And all the advocates will tell you, we'll pick you, but we can't be able to sustain you. Advocates are struggling. Doctors, we saw them, they are struggling. Those careers that all parents wished their children to become, you can imagine they are struggling. So what happens to the other Kenyan? It shows you that we need to get serious. We have talked about progressive realization of the socio-economic rights. Have we seen the government put in place steps that are geared towards realizing this? Deliberate steps. So we don't just talk about progressive realization. Progressive realization has a cutout that, are you putting up measures? We talked about to that gender role. Up to date, they have not done anything. Justice Maraga reminded us before he left the office about that issue. No one has taken action about it. So what we need is not dialogue, it is action. I think that is what the leadership need to know, that we have talked too much. We need to see, I don't need to remind the member of parliament that I am telling you I don't want an extra tax. I want you to be accountable about that. I want to remind the member of parliament that I am paying you a salary of almost $1 million shillings, then I pay you allowance to attend your plenary. Who pays us to attend plenary? And you have a salary. Who pays you to attend a committee of the job you are employed to do by the people? What makes them so scared that once they get elected, they need 10 bodyguards? What are they doing wrong? They know it. And that's what we want them to address.
Okay. Nadia, you raised an important question the last time about the role of creative and, you know, and we've seen what the creatives have been able to do for this movement in this time, using your own talents to push the conversation forward, you know, musicians, comedians, and the rest. But also, there was a question about the corporate world that would stop you doing these things before. There was a reason for that, because the corporate world and the government work, you know, hand by hand. What happens when that comes back? When you're told by the person who's gives you the contract that I continue seeing you doing these Gen Z things, I can't keep on supporting. What happens?
For me, I'd say any sane person that has seen how this revolution started. I remember the first thing was hisi time ya kupost. For instance, I work with StanChat right now, and I really appreciate them because we didn't have to tell them. They saw and they're like, you guys, you can do whatever you want to do. You understand? So for me, it's about, if you're a sane person, you can see that the pressure and the force is something that you cannot run away from. It will catch up with you. So I think we've had, you know, corporates that have been really understanding and supportive, and we haven't been blacklisted yet. We haven't been sent that you're out of work email. So they have understood. And today, I just want to talk about the power of social media as well. Huwa wanasema msanii ni kioo cha jamii. Every time. Personally, when I started doing music, I was in Maseno University, and during the holidays, we'd go to Kenya National Theatre. And we had something, Nadia, if there's any creative here, they know PAL, Poetry After Lunch. And what most people don't know, I started out as a poet. And I'd go there, if I do a small, maybe small poetry, I'd have other guys just listening to them. And what these people would talk about is the social injustices. It meant that the time wasn't then. It's a process, it's a journey. We had begun that journey of going to Poetry After Lunch. You're listening to people talk their truths. Talk about mimi nimetoka Kibera, these are the problems that I have seen. But now it has come a place whereby now we can retaliate that on social media. I can tweet and say, guys, MCSK needs to be held accountable. We can say, PRISC was given the license to collect on behalf of the other CMOs. Public participation, has it happened? We are the artists, we are the ones who are paying for these people. And that is another conversation that has been held for so long, ever since artists before me found a problem there. I have found a problem there. And I am not going to leave. You know, because at the end of the day, there's a time gonna reach I'm not able to dance on stage as I am dancing right now. So it is, as I said before, it's accountable governance. We have to hold each and every person accountable. Kila mtu. Now, to the ladies, maybe when you are wamechaguliwa, ama they've been given a position, wasiende wakatuaibisha. We've seen the likes of Karen Nyamu, more of a socialite rather than a leader. There are so many deserving women. I am sorry to say that. It's a stray bullet, but it's the truth. There are so many deserving women who are intellectual, who are smart. We don't need to know your personal life. What have you done for the girl child? For the longest time, women have fought. You're given a position, and all we can talk about is your personal life. She really needs to check herself. Yes.
All right. Thanks. Maria, if anyone engages with politics, and we look at this in this sense, that it would be foolhardy for anyone to think that the political class is going to walk away from this and surrender and say, okay, you guys have won, fantastic, we're out. Okay? that is not going to happen. They're going to rely on what they do best, which is politics. And I suspect this is what's going to happen in the next 2-3 years. From where you sit, with all these issues that we need to solve, and there are many, right? And they're serious, parliament and constitutional, two-third gender rule not anywhere being affected. There are many things on the priority of this list we just don't know and don't have. Give us some advice. How should we look at these questions that we do exercise our minds and say we should have priorities, bare minimums, and go forward? Because the political class will have that. And this is a long battle, as Reverend Goy has told us.
Yeah, so I think the first thing, we need to appreciate that the country has changed. It's not business as usual. So there's been a shift in the minds of Kenyans. Whether they're saying it or not, whether they're organizing or not, it's present. And we have to seize the moment. So where do our leaders come from? They come from within us. Today we'll sit here and say, hey, James unatosha mboga. Where tutakuchagua? But what happens? What follows after, hey, mhesh, what do we say? Toboka, kakitu kalanch, mhesh. That's the problem. Our politics, our governance is transactional. And the minute I give you a 50 bob, a 100 bob, a 200 bob, I'm done with you until next time. So this shift has to be literal. Like, we can't just talk about it, we have to live it, we have to talk it, we have to walk it. The fact of the matter is, politicians are smart. Even the ones we say are uneducated are street smart. So they will just look at what is trending and jump on it. And if we've decided that going forward, we're serious about our governance, we're serious about who gets into office, how the hell does somebody get elected while they're in jail? How do you get elected after shooting somebody dead? And DCI put out a notice that they're looking for you, and you get elected. So what Nadia, what Mike Mushiri, what other artists and individuals and human rights activists have been doing needs to be amplified. Take civic education very literally, because there are people who think that there's an MP, I think he's called Hamala, in Western. He was telling his people that sasa mjue tunamaliza maneno ya CDF, sasa msikuje kwangu kuniomba. Because that's the way things are done. You come, you ask me for 300 bob, sawa, sawa. And he'll not perform, he will not build that road. I mean, nothing will get done. So we need to amplify the voice of civic education. I think that's very important. People need to understand why electing an MCA is very important, because that's a person who's closest to you in terms of resources that have been devolved to the county. Why a political party is not more superior to an individual who's representing you at the ground. It's important for us, and I think you've debunked this, that tribalism is no longer a factor. And as long as it remains a non-factor, we are ahead. So mtu wetu, that politics is gone. So if we keep at it, and if we keep agitating for the very things that we're actually talking about, governance, accountability, transparency, right from the elective positions. And I think this is an opportunity for young people. You can get elected without being on a party. Yeah, but remember, if our institutions